Good afternoon and welcome to From Where We Are, stories of news and culture through the lens of USC, Southern California, and beyond. From Los Angeles, I'm Catherine Salisbury. On today's show, USC's will to play football this season. The Pac-12 is back. Why you won't be able to buy a new gas-powered car in California in just a few years. And we hear House Democrats plan to protect our democracy. That and more from Where We Are.
But first, these news headlines. From Annenberg Media, I'm Fiona Pastana. President Trump today again declined to commit to a peaceful transfer of power if he loses the November 3rd presidential election. He claims that mail-in voting cannot be trusted. The White House and some top Republicans say whoever wins the November election will be inaugurated as the next president. COVID-19 is now most commonly seen among young adults. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention say people in their 20s account for over a fifth of those who contracted the virus between June and August. The CDC says young adults likely contribute to community transmission of the coronavirus. North Korean troops shot, killed, and burned a South Korean fisheries inspector near the border between the countries. This might have been, according to BBC News, an example of the North's shoot-to-kill policy, meant to keep the coronavirus from spreading to their country. South Korean President Moon Jae-in has urged North Korea to take responsibility for the killing. China seeks to be carbon neutral by 2060. The country currently produces more than a quarter of the world's carbon dioxide emissions. President Xi Jinping spoke to the UN General Assembly about this step the country will take in its efforts to slow global warming. This policy does not line up with China's actions of constructing new coal plants. And a sweeter story. Happy National Horchata Day. You can celebrate by ordering this traditional Mexican drink at your local taqueria. Those are some of the top stories in the news. For Annenberg Media, I'm Fiona Pastana.
I'm with USC Annenberg Media Sports Editor, Lauren Marola. Thanks for being here, Lauren.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
So this is great news for all Trojans. What does this mean for USC football?
You know, for USC, it's really about the opportunity to play one and for the university to make money, mainly on media deals. You know, USC came into the season ranked number 17 in the AP preseason poll. With this restart, I assume USC players who have already opted out of what they thought would be a spring 2021 season, like redshirt junior offensive guard Elijah Vera Tucker and redshirt sophomore defensive lineman Jay Tufele, they'll play the 2020 season now that it has restarted. And so what this does is ultimately makes the Trojans more competitive, and it gives us a shot at the Pac-12 title.
And what does this mean for other USC sports like basketball?
So basketball is still projected to start on November 25th, on or around when the NCAA said that basketball is permitted to play. But other fall sports right now is looking like they will still start in January 2021. So we're hoping more information comes out on that soon, and that ultimately these teams will also be able to join the football team in fall play. But right now it looks like football is the only sport starting in fall of 2020.
Now, how was this all able to happen with the Pac-12?
Well, I think this was all able to happen because of the major partnership that the Pac-12 got done with Quidel Corporation. And this partnership allows for the daily rapid testing of athletes and gives Pac-12 Commissioner Larry Scott a high degree of confidence, as he says, that no player will step onto a court or onto a field infectious and encourage the spread of COVID-19. And ultimately, this new technology led the way for this football season to kick off in 2020.
And what does this mean we can expect to see with Pac-12 football this season?
You know, I think it's now a battle. These players have been itching to get on that football field, for weeks now. And so I think they're only going to bring more intensity and heart to this game because everything's on the line. And if they have a chance to make it into the college football playoff by playing just a 7-game season, then you know they're going to leave it all on the field to try and get there and beat out teams that have played seasons twice as long as them for their spot in the college football playoffs.
Absolutely. Lauren Marola, sports editor of Annenberg Media, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
A system we've relied on for the past century will undergo a momentous transformation in the coming 2 decades. California Governor Gavin Newsom filed an executive order banning the sale of new gas-powered cars by 2035. California is the first state to take this action. Jeha Joshua Chang looks at how this order will affect the lives and the air quality of Californians.
California is known for its love of automobiles. The sound of gasoline engines are something all of us are familiar with. But in 15 years, all new cars on the highway might sound like this. That was the sound of a Tesla Model S, equipped with an electric engine. And if Governor Gavin Newsom has his way, that's what all cars will sound like. Yesterday, the governor issued an executive order to ban the sale of gas-powered cars by the year 2035. Greenhouse gas emissions from cars make up more than half of all emissions in the state. And by decreasing these emissions, Newsom claims that California will benefit on 2 major fronts.
As a consequence, substantially reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as oxide nitrogen, meaning NOx emissions here in the state of California. In so doing, we'll improve air quality as well as improve the economic climate here in the state of California.
Newsom also wants to ban the sale of semi-trucks and heavy-duty trucks like dump trucks and garbage trucks by 2045 if possible. But don't worry. This doesn't mean you have to scrap your family pickup truck or your favorite gas guzzler.
You can still keep your internal combustion engine car. You can still have a market for used cars. You can still trade and transfer those cars. We're not taking anything away.
And that has some environmentalists saying it's not enough. Alvaro Sanchez is the Environmental Equity Director at the Oakland-based nonprofit, the Green Lining Institute.
After the executive order, we need to go into implementation from the regulatory agencies to make sure that we have actual tangible things that could be done to achieve that goal. We need additional pieces of legislation from our legislature so that the executive order doesn't change just with a change in executive office.
And for some Trojans, like Junior Gabriel Lacayo, this new order doesn't faze him at all. He says it's all about affordability.
For me personally, I was always going to buy a used car, and generally gas-powered used cars are the cheapest to get. I'm not exactly sure on the pricing of used electric cars, but at least for now, I only think of buying a gas for now.
But Lacayo didn't rule out on electric cars, as long as it's affordable. You hear that, Elon Musk? For Annenberg Media, I'm Jeha Joshua Chang.
House Democrats unveiled this week at a news conference a sweeping package of proposals designed to stop future abuses of presidential power. Ayanna White spoke with the co-director of the Institute of Governmental Studies at UC Berkeley, Eric Schickler, about what the Democrats aim to achieve.
I mean, it's a pretty far-reaching proposal geared toward countering some of what many Democrats and some others see as excesses or abuses of power by the Trump administration. But maybe arguably some of the most important has to do with presidential congressional relations. So prevent the president from using things like emergency declarations to change how budgeting is done, the spending of money without approval from Congress, and also to try to require presidential executive branch officials to testify before Congress to allow for Congress to conduct greater oversight.
And has anything like this ever been passed or proposed before?
So I think the best analog to what we're seeing is what happened in the wake of Vietnam and Watergate, where President Nixon and before that President Johnson had expanded presidential power. And in that case, there was a series of laws rather than just one single law, but a series of laws passed by Congress to try to rein in the president. So for example, it passed a budget act to prevent presidents from simply changing how money is spent against Congress's wishes. That was passed in 1974. And what we're seeing now with President Trump is, in a sense, certainly violating the spirit of that act with the money that he repurposed to build the wall.
Why do you think the Democrats think that this is necessary?
President Trump really has pushed the boundaries of presidential power, far beyond what had been understood as acceptable. The sheer range and audacity of moves by President Trump on this worries a lot of Democrats and at least hopefully some Republicans about what is being done in terms of ensuring that we keep a system of checks and balances and limited presidential power.
This bill still has to be passed, right?
It's going to be a tough challenge to get this passed. And I think the big difference is in the 1970s, you actually had a lot of Republicans, even though it was a Republican President Nixon who people were responding to most directly, but a lot of Republicans who themselves viewed what Nixon did as going too far. And so all of the legislation passed to rein in the president in the 70s was passed with bipartisan majorities. Today, it's going to be a lot harder to get Republicans on board, especially to the extent that they see this as a response to Trump. I think the hope that Democrats have, though, is if there's a Biden administration, then maybe at least over time, Republicans will shift a little bit in their view of presidential power. But it needs to pass the House, needs to pass the Senate, and needs to be signed by the president.
And why do you think this was proposed now and not early sometime before?
So many Trump actions have kind of come together now so that the fear about what some of his actions mean for the future of American democracy has kind of reached a critical point, a boiling point. I think that likely led Speaker Pelosi and these Democratic chairs to decide that they need to lay a marker down and at least say, okay, this is what we need in terms of reforms, even if it's not going to be enacted this year. Even if it were to pass the House, Mitch McConnell is not going to let it get to the floor of the Senate. But even if it's not enacted, it's important to at least lay down a marker of this is what a good system of rules would look like.
That was Eric Schickler, co-director of the Institute of Governmental Studies at UC Berkeley, talking with Ayanna White. And that's all for today's From Where We Are. Fiona Pistana, producer of our show. Ayanna White and Jeha Joshua Chang are executive producers. We had help from Reagan Griffin Jr., Emily Schurz, Alexandra Block, Katie Clark, and Sarah Atashi. I'm Catherine Salisbury. For all of us at Annenberg Media, we'll see you again next week.